iced coffee? Like what is it about? Is it bitter?
I
Like,
don't know, they don't mix it well. So like all the syrups, the glass of syrup stays at the bottom, it's very bitter.
yeah. So when you get it, do you like try to
Yeah.
scrape it off the bottom? Yeah, I don't, but you know what? Maybe because I always get just hot coffee or something. Usually it's pretty good. Man, Portillo's has the best chocolate cake.
Have you tried the chili cheese dogs?
No.
Really good.
Really good
Yeah.
chili cheese dogs? Okay, I gotta try it. And I did see they got like a couple of new milkshakes on it. Try like a caramel, something. You know, I could care less about Portillo's, so their fries are like okay, and their pops kind of weak. What did you get to drink?
I read it at the doors right now. I just ate the cup, the matcha.
A matcha. Okay. All right. Everybody had a good weekend?
Yes.
Ask these people. Anything exciting over here? Over the weekend, anything exciting new? No. How are we looking with our projects, our case study? Next week we will start our presentations.
Could I, if I'm done or before that, can I send it to you?
Yeah. Like, are you already done and ready to go?
Not yet, I just wanna verify with you.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, you can submit it. Yeah, on Canvas, you could go ahead and submit everything. And if if you're early and want to present on Thursday, feel free to do so at some point. But I want everybody to be ready by next Tuesday. All right, moving along. We're probably, another question.
When is the last day for your class?
I'll get back to you on that. Whatever that Thursday is for finals week. But usually finals week has a schedule, right? So depending on when your classes are, there'll be a finals schedule. So I have to get back to you on that.
Our final exam is gonna be on the 12th, I believe, of December, so I think it would be on the 11th, no?
Okay, so yeah, maybe 11. But you can also just take a look. You could go online on Dominican's website or just Google it, like finals schedule for Dominican, and it'll show if we have classes at these times, when that designated finals time will be. Right, so it'll be whatever our class falls on, 4:30 to 5:45, they would assign it that time. Right, but we'll talk more about the final as we get closer to it. Okay, moving along. Probably in one of the most interesting phases in lifespan development, which is the phase in which you all are in now. Right? We'll talk about that this week. You're in emerging adulthood. Why do we call it emerging? Well, it's because it's changed. It used to be a lot different in the past. Why? Because people had limited options. Right, so you think way in the past, think of maybe 80 years ago or so, you probably went to high school, graduated, and you probably immediately took up a job. And maybe that job you stayed with for 30, 40 years. You probably bought a home fairly quickly because it was quite affordable. That would even save up money to buy in cash. If you chose to go to college, not everyone had that privilege to. college wasn't as open as it was to the general society as it was in the past, right? A select few people went to college. Most people probably just went and did some type of work, right? Whether it be physical labor or something else. You probably started a family relatively early, right? Got the jump on that. Probably got married relatively early, probably late teens or early 20s for the most part. And you built a life from that, and that was pretty much, everything was set pretty early. Things have changed because now we're like, oh, we have a lot of options, right? We're like, hey, go to college, not go to college, but I can always come back to college to some degree. I could get into some kind of college, right? So many different types of jobs out there. We could make, hey, you could do contract work, or even just use your car to work for Uber and Lyft, Uber Eats, Grubhub. Maybe you could get a regular job, go work retail, something of the sort. You're not staying at jobs forever anymore, so on average, you may be staying at a job 7 years, and you keep switching, because our environment is changing, right? People are waiting to get married. People are waiting to have children, because now we're probably concerned with the number one thing, which is financial stability, right? Financial stability was probably a little bit more easier in the past. Now, not so easy, because you're like, no one can afford a home cash. Those days are gone. No one can afford to pay for actual college from a regular job. Those days are gone. So for the most part, you're gonna be in debt for a very long time. You know, always owe some debt, whether it's a house, a car, or college with student loans. And it's gonna take you time to build up to maybe get to a particular point in your life where you feel that you're ready to actually start adulting, right? To actually start adulting. So in the meantime, why we call it emerging, because there's a lot of differences. So how we could describe this is late adolescence to about 30 years old, because we're all so different. So think of everybody that's left high school that you went to high school with, up to maybe the age of 25 or 30, everybody's doing completely different things. Some people live in another country, some people started a family, some people are like, nah, no way am I starting a family that early. Some people are just doing so many different things. It's different than high school or grammar school, which we saw before. Everybody was locked into the same environment. You were in school. You didn't have rights and privileges that maybe an adult had. So you were under the rule of others, right? So a lot of different changes, a lot of different kind of disparities when we look at emerging adulthood. A lot of challenges. We'll talk about the physical and cognitive kind of challenges and changes today, and then we'll go into social, emotional next week. But in thinking that, hey, you know what? At this point, you want to be an adult. Do all of you define yourselves as an adult? Or no? Any of you define yourselves something else? Do you feel that you're an adult?
I feel like I'm a young adult, like not really an adult. I wouldn't consider myself an adult because to me, an adult would be someone who is independent fully on, and I'm not full on independence from my parents.
Okay. And so that's why we have emerging adult. We're like, hey, it's kind of tricky. Some people are in some gray areas, right? Some people may feel they're full-fledged adult. But there's kind of a dynamic there. You're like, well, I'm trying to get away from my parents' authority, but then I might still live at home and have to abide by the rules because I'm not financially stable. I'm going to college, I'm trying to figure life out so I can be financially stable and become a full-fledged adult. How do you perceive it? Because it could be different. It could be a cultural thing. You know, and so we have to consider all these different challenges. Maybe some people come from a culture where they're married off. Like, oh, graduated high school, now you're getting married. Found somebody, we're setting up the wedding. Like, what? I'm only 18, right? So cultural components as well too, right? So it's a lot of factors, environmental things, social things. You think of changing status, right? And so maybe a significant thing here is a change of statuses. What I mean by statuses is that, let's say you went to high school and now there's graduation in high school, you get your diploma, and you, like that day, you socially have a new identity. You're a high school graduated. And in most people's minds, socially, you're an adult, right? So we say socially, people are defining you as an adult. Oh, you graduated high school, you're an adult. You're like, hold on, I still live at home with mom and dad. I don't have any money or a job or a car. Right? So you're like, I'm not really an adult, right? So it's a lot of dynamics, hence why we have emerging adult. So once again, it's like emerging adult has like 18 to 30. Like that's a pretty big spread because a lot of people are figuring out who they are, reaching new plateaus and statuses, going to college, living at home, and still trying to be independent, even though their parents still tell them what to do half the time, because they have to listen, right? New things. So this kind of phase is probably the most interesting phase, right? So we'll talk about some of the challenges and differences in this phase. Senescence. Senescence deals with decline, right? And like, well, typically speaking, you would be in your best health as reported by kind of everyone who's taken different sort of surveys from every age range. This age range, emerging adult, we say about 18 to 30, reports the greatest physical health. So it means that you are probably in the greatest physical health that you will ever be for the rest of your life.
This stage?
This
The
age.
early adulthood?
Yeah, emerging adulthood, right? So you're like, hey, but with that, remember we say the brain is still changing. So if you're in the greatest physical health, you may have a lot of physical confidence, but your brain may have poor judgments still. You're not evaluating risk. So you may live in the ideals of what you could do versus the reality of dangers. Hence why usually the greatest thing that leads to death for this age is accidents. Accidents and injuries, right? Why? Because there's confidence of your physical capabilities, but your mind is still developing, your brain is still changing, and you may not make the greatest decisions, right? So jumping off a cliff, diving into a pool head first without knowing how deep it is, texting and driving, right? Driving with just your leg or something, right? While you like eat your food, you know, I mean, like all sorts of things, right? But also on the physical side, senescence, you're like, well, what part of you is kind of declining? Well, children around the age of 8 have the best vision, have the best hearing. So theoretically, your hearing and your vision is old, even though you're only like, whatever, right? 19, 20, 21, etc. So there is some decline. So it means those things will decline over time, right? So a lot of times, especially for different sort of pitches and tones. So high pitched things, there's a decline maybe after the age of 8, right? So some children report like, wow, you don't hear that thing? And you're like, nah, I hear absolutely nothing, right? Small children can pick up high pitch sounds than we can, right? And our vision is declining over time, will gradually get worse. So there is kind of some things that are beginning to decline for us. I mean, it's not a surprise, to be honest, because we're like, if we're thinking things from a natural point of view, if puberty is the phase in which nature kind of activates us to continue the species and do all these things and hormones, and probably anything after that, you know, like there might start to be some declines there, because maybe nature kind of feels like that was the stage of actual adulthood or maturity. But socially, like, no, you gotta have a house, a car, a job, blah, 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 to be responsible, right? Difference there. All right, right, we say multi-dimensional, multi-directional, right? And hence is why we call it emerging such huge gaps, right? Multi-dimensional mean like, hey, some people not in college, don't wanna go to college. They can't afford to go to college. They already got a job, right? With that job, maybe they already bought a condo. But they already may have bought a house. With that, they already may have started a family. You're hanging out in college and somebody's like, yeah, I'm out with my 3 kids. And they graduated high school with you. So you're like, there's different layers because there's this release. The release from the authority of rules, laws of your parents and socially. You can do whatever you want to do. Go to school, don't go to school, who cares? Before that, you're like, no, the law says you gotta go to school, I should be considered truant, right? And your parents have your responsibility over you as a human being. Now you're like, there's a lot of stuff I can do, whatever I want to do. So like, everybody's kind of in different phases within a phase, right? So like, that's why it tends to be multi-dimensional and directional, right? And even when we think of maybe cognitively, because if you are in school, your brain is taking in a ton of novel or new information. Someone else may have a job where they do the same thing every day. So their brain is not adapting to new information the way that yours is, taking these courses and subjects and topics, which is probably extremely important, right? Because you're like, hey, I'm building my storehouse of knowledge about so many different things. And this will probably lead me to a good personal identity, like, I finally know what I want to do. Beyond that, I finally know who I am now. It took me a lot of things to try out school, talk to other students, professors, to kind of figure out what I want to do. Now, had you not gone to college, you're like, you might have been working some job where you literally just do the same thing every day. So why don't you need to read? Why don't you need to do homework? Why don't you need to remember anything? Push yourself academically to remember facts and things and put things together, involve stories and narratives and purpose and meaning, all these different things, right? So that's why we say, hey, you know, physically with the brain too, like things are multi-dimensional, multi-directional, right? Depending on where you're at in this phase. It's different than other phases because everybody's kind of almost in the same sort of bracket. High variability in physical functioning, right? Once again, if you're going to school and learning things, if you are now an athlete and you're in college and you're like, hey, now we're scaling up a bit. This is kind of getting more professional as an athlete. You're working systems, you're pushing yourselves, right? You're competing a little bit more than you were before. So that could create a lot of physical functioning versus if you're not. If you're sedentary and you're like, well, now if you say, hey, I live on my own, you're like, okay, but what's your eating habits? Well, since mom and dad are no one around, I don't really know how to cook. So now I eat every day cheeseburger, fries, pizza, microwave stuff. That can also create a lot of physical changes, right? I develop obesity, right? You might start to, have some other issues. Body starts to change, depending on where you're at with that. Even other things like stress, right? Stress changes our body tremendously, right? It changes hormone activities, right? It can make you eat more for comfort, to regulate your stress, right? Stress could be a big one too. So probably in this phase, you experience a lot of stress, which means you're trying, in your mind, you have to get X, Y, Z done so that you stay on your path to whatever ideal success you feel you need to get to be a real adult in your mind. All right, some theories of aging. Now we are concerned with aging, right? Because it's kind of like, hey, if we, as an adult, we're kind of concerned with building habits to be healthy, right? Which requires information, knowledge, et cetera, right? Exercise, right? So we know that exercise is associated with longevity. You know that you could do simple exercises, small changes can make significant differences. Other things with aging, right? Some of us do come from good genes and bad genes, right? Like, hey, mom and dad were, had some bad genetics, high blood pressure, so hypertension, diabetes, right? Some other rare disease or something of the sort. And then some of us may come from, maybe parents who live to be, parents or grandparents who live to be relatively old and not have too many issues, right? And environmental factors matter too, because we say environments impact not only things like stress, which could change your behaviors, but the things like genetic expression, which we talk about like epigenetics, right? Like, hey, certain genes are turned off, but if you're in the wrong environment for too long, surrounded by the wrong things, now you get degree for cancer, right? High likelihood or something, or schizophrenia or something, right? Had you not been in this environment, you may not have had that genetic expression. And aging at the cellular level, right? So we think of our chromosomes as shoestrings, like the two little shoestrings crossed over together, and at the tail end of those at the tail end of those gene markers, you're like, hey, they're like shoestring tips. They're hard, but then over time they get wear and they get frayed. And if they get frayed, they become open. And so things will come in and make them die. Right, so the only kind of scientific thing we know about creating a long life at a cellular level is to prevent kind of those shoestring tips not to fray, right, which we call telomeres. You can look them up, telomeres, right? But usually that's how it happens, right? And then the cells begin to die. And also your cells only have X amount of times to divide before they begin to die as well too. Other physical changes. Skin. At this stage, some of you might have had poor skin in high school, right? Acne, very oily skin, right? You may have been ashamed of it, try to cover it up. But as you age, your skin tends, around this age, your skin tends to get a lot better, right? You tend to maybe lose a lot of your acne at this stage, usually, right? Depending on other things too. For the say if you're stressed out, that could increase sebaceous oils in the glands, yes.
I just wanted to go back to what you said about like epigenetics, and I saw in this like post of all the stuff going on in Palestine and stuff, like all that bombing and destruction and like environment, like that the kids are growing up in, like all that little stuff is gonna stay like throughout generations of like more susceptible to like autoimmune diseases, stuff like that. Like that's gonna be lingering in bloodlines, and it's not just for them, it's for like every other race or whatever like you can think of. Like indigenous people have epigenetic trauma, like if you look into it. I just thought that was really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So like basically we're saying generational trauma.
Right.
Trauma that could genetically be passed on to your children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. We already know this to be true because there's a lot of markers that correlate to people's behaviors and experiences depending on what they went through, right? We can see it in African Americans with enduring slavery for close to 400 years. You can see it in Native Americans, right? Kind of propensity or proclivity to associate certain behaviors, right? Native Americans, you might say that alcohol is kind of a major thing in the community. And it happens to be something that's very old and ancient, right? It's not a new sort of behavior, right? So like, hey, even trauma Trauma experienced by a particular community, if here we're talking about things of activities and war and genocide and all these different things, yeah, that absolutely will be passed on, right? And there'll be sensitivities, right? When you say sensitivities, why are people of a certain similar community sensitive? You're like, well, maybe it's social things or news information, but oftentimes it happens to be maybe genetic sensitivities to certain things, right? So it's like, it's interesting how trauma can carry on to the next generation. And we could see this clearly, even maybe within our families, we could say, hey, mom experienced learned helplessness. Mom acts very helpless and hopeless about everything. Why? Hey, mom, what happened? Well, grandma was like that too. Right? Great-grandma was like that too. They haven't broke the generational curse.
And now you're like that, and it's up to you to
Yes.
like fix it. It's
It's
all
up to you to fix it.
individual.
And what you say, how can you fix it?
Yeah.
Well, you maybe change your environment, right? You're like mom and whoever's in an environment that makes that A-okay, right? Mom doesn't get out enough, not open-minded to see that there's endless possibilities in the world. And now you're traveling in the world, and you're like, oh man, I see everything differently now. Right? And now you're arguing with your parents about, why are you doing this? Why you travel? Why you try so many things? You're asking them, why don't you travel? Right? You have this mindset where it's just a box. Right? So yes, thank you for bringing that up. So yeah, lots of changes. Skin, right? Usually your skin gets better around this age, emerging adulthood. You start to produce less oils in the skin, right? The skin starts a little bit clearer, et cetera, et cetera. And we say, hey, you're in your physical prime, right? You're in your physical prime between this age, there's such a big sort of gap. So you probably can run fast, jump high. It's probably you ever will in your life. But there's a difference. Even things like athletes, you like, hey, the person athletic ability or physical abilities, you like, oh, they're at the top. But once again, your brain has to develop. So maybe you say certain athletes don't peak till like 35. You're like, why? Because they're smart too. They figured out this game along with their physical capabilities, as opposed to just being physically gifted and not really using your brain to figure out like things within that sport, you know? So if you see people like Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, LeBron, like usually it's not that they were the best in their 20s. Physically, yes, right? But overall, the intelligence of the game probably came later and mixed that with their physical abilities. You'll probably see them be the best at like maybe 34, 35, 33, right? Like, oh, they can do it all now before they just did one thing because they were physically gifted. Right, so like the brain has to catch up to with physical gifts in order for you to kind of integrate them to be excellent all together. All right, average fertility and reproductive category, right? Usually a woman, a female is most fertile, I would say, around this age, 18 to 30, right? You start to see a decline in fertility. Usually by the time you get to maybe early 30s or mid 30s, they call it a geriatric pregnancy, which means you're at high risk. So even if you're like 34, 35, you know, usually with the term we think geriatric is kind of older people, but we're like,